My son held my grandson's graduation without me. A week later, they showed up begging. I found out from a photograph, not a phone call, not a text, not even a secondhand mention from someone who assumed I already knew. A photograph posted publicly on the internet. My grandson, my Daniel, standing in his cap and gown, holding his diploma, grinning that enormous grin of his, surrounded by family, every member of this family, except me. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at that photo for a long time. My coffee went cold, the clock on the wall kept ticking, and asked myself one question: how did it come to this? Let me tell you who I am. My name is Robert. I'm 71 years old. Spent 38 years working in logistics management. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that paid for a house, raised a family, and put my son through college. My son's name is David, and for most of his life, we were close. Not perfect. No father and son are perfect, but close. We argued the way men argue. We made up the way men make up. We showed up for each other, or so I believed. After my wife Helen passed 6 years ago, things shifted. Grief does that too. Families. It either pulls people together, or it quietly pulls them apart. And you don't always notice which one is happening until the distance is already too wide to easily cross. David has his own family now. His wife, Sandra, is a capable woman, organized, driven, and very clear about how she believes things should be done. I respected that about her, even when it made me uncomfortable. Their son, my grandson, Daniel, is 22 years old, and one of the finest young men I've ever known. Sharp mind, kind heart. The kind of boy who remembers your birthday and means it when he asks how you're doing. Daniel and I have always had our own relationship, separate from whatever complicated thing existed between me and David. He used to call me every Sunday, just to talk. He stopped about 4 months ago. I noticed, but I told myself he was busy. Finals, graduation preparations. The business of being young and finishing something important. The last time I spoke to David directly was in February. We had a disagreement, I won't call it more than that, about Helen's china. She had a full set, beautiful pieces she'd collected over 40 years, and her will specified it come to me. David and Sandra wanted it for their dining room. Said no. It became tense. David said some things. I said some things. We hung up and neither of us called back. I told myself we'd sort it out. Families always sort things out. Daniel's graduation was on a Saturday in May. I had circled the date on my calendar in red marker. It's back in January, the day Daniel first mentioned it. My suit pressed. I had a card with a check inside, a meaningful amount, the kind a grandfather saves up for, because the moment deserves it. I was ready. Friday evening. Called David to confirm the time and where we were all meeting beforehand. No answer. I left. A message. I called Sandra's phone. No answer. I sent a text to Daniel. The message showed delivered, but no reply came. I told myself they were busy with preparations, running around, that tomorrow it would all make sense. I was still telling myself that when I woke up Saturday morning to silence. I drove to the ceremony venue myself. I had looked it up. Daniel had mentioned the name of his college's main hall months ago, and I'd written it down the way I write everything down now, because at 71, you stop trusting your memory with the things that matter most. I parked. I walked to the entrance, and that's when I saw them. David and Sandra, dressed beautifully, standing with a group of people I recognized. Sandra's sister, her husband, their adult children. Everyone was laughing and taking photos on the steps. Stopped walking. David saw me. The laugh didn't leave his face immediately. It faded the way a light fades when you slowly turn a dial. Gradual, controlled, deliberate touch. Sandra touched his arm. He walked toward me. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing here?" Those 5 words. "What are you doing here?" I looked at him for a moment. "I'm here for my grandson's graduation, David. Same as you." He glanced back at Sandra. Something passed between them, fast and practiced. "I should have called," he said. "We decided to keep it small, just immediate family." "I am immediate family?" I said. Sandra's side is all here, and it would have been a lot of people, and Daniel wanted. Is Daniel inside?" Another glance back. "Dad, I really think it's better if David stopped." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not cruelty, something almost worse, discomfort, like I was an inconvenience he hadn't fully planned for. "We'll talk after," he said. "I'll call you this week." And he walked back to Sandra. I stood on those steps for a moment. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home. I didn't go inside the ceremony. I didn't make a scene. I drove home, changed out of my suit, and sat in my kitchen until the sun went down. That was Saturday. By Sunday evening, Daniel had posted the photographs. There were 11 of them. Every angle of that ceremony. Cake at a restaurant afterward. Toasts, hugs, balloons. 11 photographs. And I was not in a single one. I closed the app. I set my phone down, and for the first time since Helen died, I cried. Not from sadness, exactly. From something older and harder than sadness. From the realization that had been deliberately removed from my own family story. Discovery 1. The visual clue. The next morning, I looked at the photos again. More carefully, this time. There was a framed photo on the table at the restaurant celebration. One of those custom pieces people have made for events. It showed Daniel through the years. Baby photos, school pictures, milestone moments. I enlarged it on my screen. I recognized almost every photo, but I also noticed what was missing. The photo of Daniel, hand me at his 8th birthday, fishing at the lake behind my house, was not there. The one of us at his high school graduation, where he was half a head taller than me already and couldn't stop grinning, not there. The one Helen always called her favorite. Daniel, at age 4, asleep on my chest on the porch swing. Gone. Someone had curated that display carefully. Someone had made deliberate choices about which grandfather appeared in my grandson's story. Discovery 2. The financial clue. Here is something people don't always know about me. For the past 4 years, I have been quietly contributing to a college fund for Daniel. Not through David directly. Through a custodial account I set up with Daniel as the beneficiary. Monthly contributions. Every month, without fail, without announcement, without expecting anything in return. It was simply what a grandfather does. 2 weeks before the graduation, I had transferred a final lump sum into that account. My way of saying, "You made it, and I am proud of you." I also had a card with a personal check, a significant one, ready to hand to Daniel in person at the ceremony. That check was still in my kitchen drawer. I pulled up the account online, and I noticed something I hadn't thought to look at. Before Daniel had been listed as the account contact since he turned 18. Routine notifications, account activity, contributions, balance updates went to his email, which meant David and Sandra likely knew the account existed. They knew I had been contributing for years. They knew there was money there. I sat with that for a long time, because suddenly the sequence of events looked different. The freeze-out after the China disagreement, the unanswered calls before the graduation, the deliberate exclusion on the day itself. It began to paint a picture I did not want to see, but could no longer look away from. Discovery 3. The behavioral clue. On Wednesday, 4 days after the graduation, my neighbor and oldest friend, a man named Frank, came by for coffee. Frank's wife is friendly with Sandra's sister. Social circles in small towns overlap in ways that are sometimes useful and sometimes uncomfortable. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, wrapped his hands around his mug and looked at me with an expression I recognized as a man trying to figure out how to say something. "Just say it, Frank," I told him. He set his mug down. "Carol had lunch with Sandra's sister last week, before the graduation, and apparently Sandra's been telling people that you and David have been estranged for years. That you were difficult after Helen passed, that you made things hard for their family." I looked at him. "She's been building a case," Frank said quietly, "with her family at least, maybe with Daniel too." Carol didn't want to say anything because she wasn't sure, but after what happened Saturday, she's been telling people I'm estranged. For a while, from what Carol said. It's a word, estranged. Not they had a disagreement. Not things have been strained. Estranged. A word with weight and permanence. A word that tells everyone around you that the door is already closed. That whatever you thought the relationship was, the other side has already filed it over. I thanked Frank after he left. I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had handled Helen's estate and who I trusted completely. I explained the plea situation, not the emotion of it, the facts, the exclusion, the financial history, the narrative being constructed about me. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Robert, I want you to do a few things. First, document everything. Dates, conversations, the photographs, the account records. Second, don't make any financial moves regarding Daniel's account yet. Third, wait for what? For them to come to you," she said, "because I think they will." I asked her why she was so sure, because people who go to the trouble of curating you out of the story usually haven't thought through what happens when the money stops. She said simply, "I sat with that, and I waited. It took exactly 9 days. I was in my backyard on a Thursday afternoon, pulling weeds from Helen's old garden bed. It's the one I keep up because it would bother me not to when I heard a car in Miney. The driveway, I came around the side of the house, David's car, and getting out of the passenger side. Daniel, I hadn't seen my grandson since before all of this, and despite everything, the sight of him, taller than I remember every time, that familiar grin already forming, did something complicated to my chest. I kept my face neutral. "Robert," David said. He called me Robert, not Dad. "David," I said. "Daniel." Daniel looked uncomfortable. He shoved his hands in his pockets and glanced at his father. "Can we come in?" David asked. "You can sit on the porch," I said. I brought out 3 glasses of water because it was warm and because it gave me something to do with my hands. We sat. David started. "I know Saturday was handled badly," he said. "I should have communicated better. Should have invited me to my grandson's graduation," I said. "It was complicated." "It wasn't complicated. David, I raised you in this house. I was there every day of your life. I have been contributing to Daniel's education for 4 years. None of that is complicated." Daniel shifted in his chair. T was watching me now, not looking away the way he had been. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "I didn't know you weren't invited until the night before." I looked at him. "What did you say?" "I thought Dad told me you two were still not talking, that you'd said you didn't want to come, that it would make things awkward." The silence that followed was very long. I turned to David. David had his jaw set, looking at the middle. "Distance. Is that what you told him?" I asked. "Dad, is that what you told your son? That I said I didn't want to come?" "The situation between us is more complicated than David." The voice was quiet, completely quiet. "Look at me." He looked at me, and I saw it. The moment a man realizes the version of events he's been managing has just come apart, in front of the one person he can't afford to lose faith in him, his son. "I called you the night before," I said, still quietly. "I called Sandra. I texted Daniel. None of you answered. I showed up to the venue, and you told me to leave. And then you told your son I chose not to come." Daniel stood up from his chair, not dramatically, just stood. "Dad," he said to David, "just the one word. But the way he said it, David put his hand up. Sandra thought. We thought it would be easier if Sandra thought. Another silence. She's been telling people we're estranged, I said, for some time now, from what I understand. It's building that story with her family, with your family, apparently, with our grandson. Daniel walked to the porch railing and stood with his back to us for a moment. Then he turned around. Is the college fund real? He asked me. The one you set up? For years, I said. Every month. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at his father, and David, my son, a grown man of 44, looked for the first time in this conversation. Genuinely ashamed. Why are you here, David? I asked. Tell me the actual reason. A long pause. Daniel starts his graduate program in the fall, he said. We were hoping, Sandra thought. If the account stopped, I said. He stopped. I leaned forward. I want to make sure I understand what's happening here. You excluded me from the most important day of my grandson's life. You lied to him about my reasons for not being there. You allowed your wife to spend months telling people that I am estranged from this family, a family I have given everything to. And now, 9 days later, you are sitting on my porch asking about money for graduate school. David didn't answer. That's what's happening, I said. Huh. It wasn't a question. Daniel sat back down. He looked at his grandfather at me, and his expression was one I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Grandpa, he said, I'm sorry. I should have called you myself. I should have asked questions instead of just accepting what I was told. That's on me. I looked at that young man, the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest on this very porch, and I felt the anger in me settle into something quieter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. I appreciate that, Daniel, I said. Mean that? I looked back at David. I have nothing to say to you today, I said. I think you need to go home and have a very honest conversation with your wife. And then I think you need to decide what kind of son you want to be for the years I have left, 'cause I am 71 years old, David, and I am not going to pretend the time is endless. He nodded. He couldn't meet my eyes. They left 20 minutes later. Daniel hugged me at the car, okay, long and tight, the way he used to when he was small. I'll call you Sunday, he said. I'll be here, I told him. Watched the car until it turned the corner. Then I went inside, called Patricia, and told her what had been said. She listened. Then she said, what do you want to do? And for the first time in weeks, I actually knew the answer. I did not close the college fund. I want to be clear about that, because I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. I did not punish Daniel for his father's choices. That account existed for Daniel, not as leverage, and it would remain for Daniel. Patricia and I restructured it so that the disbursements went directly to the graduate program, tuition directly paid. Not through David, not through Sandra, directly the personal check, the one that had been sitting in my kitchen drawer since before the graduation, I mailed to Daniel with a note, a short one. This is for the day I should have been there. I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you, Grandpa. As for David, he called me 2 weeks later, not to ask for anything, just to talk. The conversation was stilted at first, the way conversations are when two people are carefully navigating the debris of something that broke, but it was honest. He told me that Sandra had been the primary force behind how things had been framed, that she had genuine grievances about the China disagreement, about other moments she'd felt sidelined over the years, that those grievances had quietly grown into something that shaped the way she talked about me to her family, to Daniel, to David himself. He said he had allowed it because it was easier than disagreeing with her, and he said he was ashamed of that. I did not tell him everything was fine, because it wasn't. Not yet, but I told him I heard him, and I told him that if he wanted to rebuild, I was willing, but that it would require honesty from now on. Real honesty, not the managed, comfortable kind. I can do that, he said. Hope so, I said. I genuinely hope so. Daniel started calling. Again on Sundays. The first few were a little careful. We were both finding our footing after everything. By the third or fourth week, it was just us again. Him telling me about his program, asking my opinion on things the way he always did, laughing at my stories about things that happened before he was born. One Sunday, he said, "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything," I said. "Were you angry? Like really angry? After everything?" Thought about that honestly before I answered. "Yes," I said, "I was." Not the loud kind of angry, the quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest and makes everything feel a little heavier. "How did you get past it?" I remembered what mattered. I said, "You mattered. The relationship mattered, okay?" And I decided that I wasn't going to let other people's choices shrink me down into someone who closes doors. Your grandmother never closed doors. I want to be more like her. Pause on the line. She would have handled Saturday a lot better than I did, I added. Daniel laughed that big, room-filling laugh. She would have shown up with a casserole and made everyone feel guilty, he said. Exactly, I said, with a smile the whole time. There is a photograph on my mantle now. I had it printed and framed after all of this settled. It's Daniel and me. Not from the graduation, from a few weeks later, when he came to visit on his own. We're standing in Helen's garden, both of us squinting, slightly because the sun was behind the camera. We're not dressed up. We're not performing anything. We just look like what we are. Grandfather and his grandson, present, together. Here is what I know now. Sitting in this kitchen at 71, with the coffee warm and the morning quiet around me, family is not something you can take for granted. Not the love in it, and not the honesty it requires to survive. There will be people in your life, even people you love, even people you raised, who will, at some point, choose the easier version of things over the true version, who will allow distance to become the story because the alternative requires a difficult conversation. That is not a reason to close your heart, but it is a reason to stay awake, to pay attention, to notice when the calls stop coming, and ask yourself, honestly, why? I almost let that distance become permanent. I almost convinced myself that if my son didn't want me there, then perhaps I had been wrong about what we were to each other. But then Daniel sat on my porch and said, I didn't know, and everything shifted, because the truth has a way of doing that. It shifts things, if you give it the chance. I said too. Cups out for coffee these days when Daniel visits. He comes by more than he used to, sometimes with questions about life, sometimes with no reason at all, just to sit and be somewhere that feels like home. Last week, he came by on a Tuesday, which surprised me. He sat at my kitchen table, wrapped his hands around his mug, way Frank does, and looked around the kitchen the way people look at places they grew up in, like they're reading something. I like it here, he said. You grew up here, I told him. I know, he said. That's why. We sat there in the quiet for a while, the clock on the wall, the birds outside, the coffee warm between us, and it was enough. It was more than enough. If you're watching this and you have someone in your life, a parent, a grandparent, someone who has simply been there, quietly, consistently, without making a production of it, call them, not tomorrow, today, because the quiet ones are often the ones holding the most tea, and they don't always say so, and sometimes the most important thing you'll ever do is simply pick up the phone